Yes.
Nothing at all was conclusive until the end.
Well, they wanted to make a show.
Right.
They needed to make a show about this. It's an interesting show. They got the grandson of this murderer.
Great
And the timelines match up, and it's like everything else seemed like it was a little bit forced and filled in.
How about when, they took it to a lot of people that had their professions.
Yeah.
Were to try to come up with their opinion about certain things, and one of them was they had a linguist.
Right.
Because they had letters that supposedly the Ripper had written to, like, an editor of a newspaper. And the linguist said that he believed that Ripper's letter came from an American writer.
Right.
Just by certain...
The use of the word boss was one
Yeah,
of
he
them.
said hi boss was the beginning of the letter. And
just a couple other phrases, I can't quite remember them all.
Yeah, there was
that were different in, the English way of speaking than
it just
American
seems to
way
me
of speaking.
like the guy's going to go all the way to England. This guy who's got a great track record of doing all kinds of funny business deals and swindling people. And he's going to go to England. He's just going to kill 5 people and come back. I mean, especially when he didn't need to, and he was so. I'm going to be the skeptic, I guess.
That's fine.
But he's traveling all around, all over the United States. They know where he was in. They even know the hotels that he used to stay at in New York. But in England, it's just Jack the Ripper. That's it. There's no we checked into this hotel. He used to live here.
There were some witnesses.
There was eyewitnesses saw a doctor-looking person.
There was an eyewitness who...
There were 11 eyewitnesses.
He stayed in a house.
Well, no, to Ripper there were.
He stayed in some kind of boarding house or something, and the woman saw him coming back. She doesn't know who it is, but she identified somebody coming back that looked like Holmes, that was bloody, had bloody cuffs on, and, and then but this is, going ahead towards the end. She said 25 years later, she thought she saw him again.
Right.
Right,
but that's a different.
Well, that's the whole story where Holmes skips the grave.
He thought that
he got away.
Out of the grave,
but he didn't.
He didn't. They found his body.
Well, Keith, we're going to save that till the end.
Okay.
Or, HH, we'll save that till the end.
So anyway, it turns out in 1889 is when Holmes constructed the castle.
Right.
The Ripper killings
stopped
when,
as far as they knew, in November of 1888. I believe it was either October or November of 1888.
Now there were other people that they had spoken to that were professionals. Like they spoke to a historian. I have his name as Adam Seltzer, and he gave information about Julia and her little girl Pearl, who Holmes murdered in 1891. And this is just to establish some kind of a timeline. Carrie Brown was murdered in New York in 1891.
And who is Carrie Brown?
She was a prostitute.
Okay.
And they said it was done in Ripper style. She was disemboweled and she was strangled first.
Okay.
So it looked like even the Ripper would strangle his victims before he cut them up.
They did find out that, yes, because of the way the blood was pooling and there wasn't splatter in any of the crime scenes.
They weren't stabbed to death.
That they were not stabbed to death.
First.
Yes, they were
rendered
already
unconscious
or dead because their blood wasn't flowing.
Suffocating, yeah.
Yes.
The other, I thought, compelling evidence was they had the witness reports from England, where they were able to do a computer-generated picture of Jack the Ripper based on these witnesses.
And they did have a person that actually did do the
that she was professional at
artist,
doing
yes.
this. And it was done on a computer. It wasn't like she sketched it. Somehow the computer
yeah.
was smart. But anyway,
Most of them are now, so yeah.
They had that picture, and then they had the picture of H.H. Holmes, and they did a side-by-side comparison. And oh my God, if that wasn't compelling, nothing was. Did you see that part?
I did see that.
And they were like,
they looked similar.
Very,
I have to say.
very.
Yeah.
A little difference in the eyes, I thought, but otherwise,
But the picture of Holmes was 5 years later or more.
Yeah.
So he would have aged, especially
Well,
back then. You aged
You
a
put
lot
a hat and a
faster.
mustache on people, everybody looks like Holmes.
so true. You're scaring me.
You know? We can all
Not
be
even
Holmes.
Halloween, and look where we're
We can all be
going.
Holmes.
And then let's continue with this.
Okay, so then we come back to the United States. And what other compelling evidence did they have once they came back to the United States?
Well, they had a handwriting expert
Okay.
who compared the letter to other documents that they had signed by H.H. Holmes.
Okay.
He could not conclusively say that it was the same handwriting.
Yeah, it almost seemed like they forced him to say inconclusive, because everything he was saying, pointing out, didn't match. Don't
So there
match.
were
These don't
more
match. This don't match.
there were more things that didn't match as opposed to things
I
that
don't think he
did.
didn't
Yeah.
want to disappoint
Okay.
the guy, though.
Maybe.
I mean, the other thing is, you're investigating something that's 150 years old.
Right.
You're getting people doing this, and you're making a show about it. I mean, you don't want to be the party pooper. You don't want to be the guy that comes in and be
which
like,
he is
nope,
being
sorry,
at
it
this
wasn't
point.
Holmes. 'Cause that's what I'm at. That's my role. And you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that's the other
yeah.
part of this, that the other human side of it, two things. One is, especially the Ripper, Holmes never became the legendary killer like Jack the Ripper was just like a legendary killer.
Right.
And then he becomes almost like this magical person that is even more stuff. And then, right? And then you heap more stuff onto him, even though what he did do is horrific and outrageous. But then he becomes this larger than life figure and in the human imagination, right? Because even when they were investigating in that time period, you know, people were writing letters in, people were admitting to being the Ripper that weren't. People were like crazy. I mean, that's
that
humans
happens
are
with
doing.
every crime.
That's
doesn't
what
it?
I
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like,
That's what I took from it too. In his, we didn't know about H.H. Holmes until we started looking into
Right,
this.
everybody
So
knows
he
who Jack the
wasn't.
Ripper is.
Everybody knows who. Right. So when he was going to be put to death, why didn't he? Because Jack the Ripper, everyone even knew about Jack the Ripper back then in the United States.
he would admit it
So
to it probably
he-
to make himself even bigger.
Yeah.
That's one thing that and I didn't see the whole thing, but I would have thought that he would have put his name to it just to make him bigger or larger than life.
Right, it feeds into the whole
So-
psychology of a.
Yeah. So
Psychopath.
I thought that as well when I was watching this and then thinking, why didn't he say that when he did this book and everything else that he or alluded to the fact that he might have done something in
It doesn't seem
England.
like ever
He
he
did-
traveled overseas. He
No, he
basically-
did. I think they said he did travel overseas. They do have
No, he said he was going to.
in his. Oh, I thought
Yeah.
in his writings he said he
No,
did.
he said he was going to, and then they were like,
He was about
"It's a
to.
river." Dude, you know, he didn't do it. They said he was planning on it or something. He had some
He was
plan.
planning on going there to England, and they were getting, and he picked London, which was another circumstantial thing. Why there? But anyway,
Well,
he was going to go there and take his wife at the time, his third wife, with him because they were closing in on him,
Mm.
and he was going to flee there.
Hmm.
They got him, so he didn't go.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
But he was
And
going to
it-
go there.
right.
And
And you
that's
know
'cause that was
that
after
he
the
was
war,
hung here in Philadelphia,
Yeah, yeah.
in Manayunk, It was a prison that's no longer here anymore.
Yeah.
Really?
In
Yeah.
fact, the
Yeah.
prison that they walked through was Eastern State Penitentiary.
Eastern-
That's still there, and you can
yeah.
actually go on tours.
Right.
Actually, my daughter lives down the street from
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And that's a really interesting thing to check out because it was built in the with the Quaker. The original concept was that prisoners would be kept in total isolation. That they thought that would
Heal
help them, heal them, renew them. They
Well, the
they
first prison are you talking
I'm
about?
talking about Eastern State Pen.
Oh.
But he was in Wyomissing Prison, which is in Manioc, which is it was taken down
Okay.
a long time ago, in mid 1900s.
But they were similar,
But he was actually
so
home
that's why they
in
went to the Eastern State Penitentiary.
in
Got it.
Philadelphia, and the thing is that how he got into prison was not for murder, was originally because of the
Swindling and
right,
yeah.
and then he was going to get this other criminal in on this deal.
Yeah,
He
and
never
he-
gave him
he
the
never
500.
gave
That
him
guy
that.
ratted him out
Right, he ran
on
it.
the Peitzel
Right, and he met
insurance thing.
that other person, and I don't have his name, it's shame on me, I didn't write it down. But that other person who was in prison with him,
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
the one that ratted him out.
he was some kind of
He
bank
was another
robber.
murder. Or,
Yeah,
Bank
yeah,
robber.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, let's not forget, when he was building that murder castle, it was during the 1893 World's Fair
Right.
in Chicago.
Yeah.
And that was ripe hunting grounds for H.H. Holmes. Because he had that hotel, he would lease rooms out, people would go and never come back.
Mm-hmm.
They were vanished. So they do think that the count of people that H.H. Holmes murdered is more than what he's confessed to.
Mm-hmm.
And then even the ones that he confessed to, they found some of them were still alive.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky thing. And see, I looked into this and I saw, you know, who's the confession murderer?
Henry Lee Lucas.
Henry Lee Lucas. Where you got this person that's just can't tell the truth for nothing. Just lying and to the very bitter end, trying to swindle people, right? Or trying to create some story about himself. And so it's a little bit deceptive. It could be deceptive as that he was this murderer that did 200 people, like Henry Lee Lucas,
Right.
that he wanted to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, you know, it's hard because it captures our imagination too.
It
Oh, we
sounds
got this,
larger than life.
Larger
Well, don't
than life
forget,
killer.
he
Yeah.
did build this.
which is quite larger
Which is
than
larger
life.
than life, yes.
Right.
It's
I
not
don't
no
think-
longer there, but
Yeah, I wonder if it's like Aleister Crowley and all these. There's lots of other crazy people that built things. Has anybody ever built like a building like that?
I
I don't know.
I
I'd like to
don't know.
check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting to find out.
but that building is not there. When they did come back in this documentary, they did dig in the parking lot.
No, they
correct?
weren't.
No, they
allowed
weren't
to.
allowed to.
Okay,
wanted
because there's
to.
now a post office, and next to the post office is a parking lot that this building sat on.
Right.
But they weren't allowed to.
Right,
It's just-
they said the basement was really where they wanted to dig. The basement was adjacent or.
Well, where the
corresponding.
oven was, so
Yeah.
to speak, right there.
Yeah.
And then they even did a test of the pig remains to see if you put it in a furnace, what happens? Is there going to be something left over?
Right.
That was kind of interesting.
And
Well-
what happened?
They saw there was
There's stuff left
there
over.
was stuff left over that you could
Bone.
define as a bone.
They couldn't get, he couldn't get, it wasn't possible for him to get the furnace hot enough
Mm-hmm.
because it was wood that he was burning to disintegrate.
Completely the center.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So-
there had to be remnants somewhere that he
Right,
would
and
have
it-
dug or.
Or
Yeah.
he would have had to get rid of, or he would have
Mhm.
buried in the basement. Who knows?
Right. Now, let me think where I was. So, when he left, there was a building in Chicago, when you talked
The
about
concrete.
this to me. He owned a couple other properties
Right.
around in Chicago. So there could have been bodies.
Places that he
put-
put.
Well,
Put
they
it
were going,
anywhere.
that's what they were doing with the Chicago River.
Right.
They went through and did this
So that was another part of
Sonar.
this.
Thing.
sonar, video,
Yeah.
and then nothing.
Well,
Yeah.
they found.
They didn't find nothing. They
Did
never went down there.
I
They
didn't
never
get
went
that.
down
They
there.
never went down. They never
No,
got
they
to
got
said
down.
that it was a very based upon like how much time had gone by. There was a like hazardous material
They
inside the
wouldn't give
water.
them permission
Yeah, they
to
thought it would
go
be
down.
too dangerous for someone to dive.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But the sonar, so the guy that was the expert
Mm-hmm.
who was dropping that thing down into the water was saying, "Oh yeah, look, there's a compression. There's a an area that looks like something heavy was dropped
Size of a
there."
body.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be a coffin. It could be.
Therefore,
But
he
they're-
must be Jack the Ripper.
They're saying that.
When they even put the pig remains in concrete to
Yeah,
show you,
yeah, and I don't
which
know
that
what the
was a
point of
little
that
goofy
was.
because it wasn't even done right. Because when they broke that box open, I could see that they didn't cover the pig remains. They were on the side there. They just
Yeah.
wanted to show you that over time.
And they put it in water, and it was only in water for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Compared to 125 years, it's not a comparison.
So let's
Right.
tell our viewers what you guys are talking about. These are tests that they're
They
doing.
did the test,
They were, yeah.
Okay.
which again I think makes an interesting television show, but I don't know how much. I mean, they had this little wooden chest. They mixed concrete up by hand. They threw pig remains in there. I don't know. I mean, I'm a structural engineer, but I was like, that was a little weak for me.
Yeah.
And anyway, when they broke the box away, I could see the pig remains right on the outside. They didn't actually encase it, but they were trying to prove that we could, if there was bodies that Henry Lucas, that H.H. Holmes dumped down in there, that we could theoretically go down there, pull the concrete up, open it up, find the remains, see what kind of wounds were in it,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
tie that in.
They-
Tie that into H.H. Holmes, or tie it into Jack the Ripper all the way over in
I mean,
London.
that was his quest.
Yeah.
His quest was to be able to prove.
That his great grandfather.
Well, it was
Jack
good
the Ripper.
entertainment.
Yeah.
What was the other compelling
And
thing?
Keith is a structural engineer, so he could actually, because he's H.H. Holmes, would have known how to build this murder
What a-
castle.
Yeah,
We're just trying to tie everything.
tie it all in. Then I am H.H. Holmes.
Or Jack the Ripper.
Jack the Ripper.
Right.
He's never been to England.
What's the difference?
I don't know. Maybe he
I
has,
haven't.
but I don't know if he's been to England.
I haven't. One thing that was like interesting to me too is that because I was, what's going on at that time period, and one of the things was that World's Fairs when they invented the light bulb.
Yeah.
And they lit the whole place up with the light bulbs.
Wasn't that so interesting?
Yeah.
And they
did
had
you know
Grover Cleveland.
Right.
He
He
got
threw
to
the
push
switch.
yeah.
He was
Lit up the
president.
whole-
Was he president at that point?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and
I'm
they're
horrible with
that World's
presidential
Fair was
history.
over 80 acres? Did they say?
Yeah. Millions of people.
Millions
Yeah.
of people. They lit up
And
the whole place.
The other thing
The
that
light
was
bulb they never
happening,
had.
there was a bit of a depression in that time period because it was something about a wheat feud. There was a run on, wheat prices collapsed. And then there was a run on gold. And it's called the Panic of 1893.
Oh.
Okay.
So there was a depression that was happening in the economy at that time. But also, the time period is known as the gay 90s because of people wearing bright colors because
Yeah,
they invented dye for clothing, which I don't know, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It
All
must
of
have
this
been
is
like
interesting. Yeah.
in that it must have been a very colorful scene, especially when you look at those old black and white photos. You can't tell, but everybody's got a hat on.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a dang hat on, right?
So cool.
Everybody's got a hat on, and they're all dressed
the
up.
women wore
In the
hats.
summer.
Yeah,
They're like wearing
Summer.
suits
It's like
outdoors.
That was the style.
We'd be melting.
They didn't have casual clothing, I guess.
hopefully they had deodorant.
Yeah.
But you know what?
That probably
They did.
wasn't even invented back then
No, they
either.
probably just used to
Nah, they probably just stank.
That was also leading up to the time.
Roses under their arms.
Women weren't allowed to
Things
vote.
like that.
Ladies, women weren't allowed to vote at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually in 1903 is when they started the movement of the suffragette movement, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it wasn't until 1920 that women got to vote.
Right.
And then I was looking at up until the mid 1800s, women couldn't even own property. They were, and it was a state thing. They didn't actually pass like a overall, but they were all different states are giving women rights to property and rights to actually govern their own money, which is insane, isn't it? I'm thinking about it.
The one woman.
Oh yeah, it is very insane.
I know. What?
As he sits next to
It's
three
insane that we let them have property.
That one woman, Minnie, was it Williams, Minnie?
She was his last wife, Minnie.
Yeah.
I don't think she was his wife.
I thought she was his last wife.
She and her sister.
Right.
Oh, that was the two.
And you reminded me when you said women couldn't own land. Well, they had property that they signed over to him.
I
Right.
remember that.
They were getting it inherited, right? They were going to inherit it.
I guess.
I think it was an inheritance.
But they did sign it over to him. He ended up killing.
You know, I'm sure he's going to work in some kind of deal where, you know, I don't
Maybe.
know, get rich quick. I don't
But
know.
Yeah, it was, to me, it was such a crazy phenomena that he was able to be so convincing to people that not only to get them to get out insurance, but to put him as a beneficiary. I was like, it's not like, oh, I'm your friend or I'm like your relative.
And I've
like,
been around you for 50 years.
This is
Well,
someone
he
he,
wasn't
they're,
50,
they're,
but
well, they just met
at least
They're
5
like,
years.
oh, here.
Yeah.
And they didn't suspect any
wrongdoing
or any
Yeah.
motive that he would have.
now on that property that he swindled from her, he was going to build another
Murder
castle.
Yeah, that was out in another, where
That
was that,
was
in Ohio?
in Fort Worth, Texas.
Texas, okay, right.
That
And
was
they,
Fort
and they went
Worth.
out there and dug up and looking for the boy, Peitzel's boy.
Right, and they
They found chicken bones.
found chicken bones. They found bones, but they
And
were very
well,
disappointed.
they found bones that looked like they were cut.
Yeah,
It's the Ripper. That's what they did.
Who would cut animal bones like that and bury them? I wondered about that too.
Yeah.
Well,
Somebody that
farmers,
wants to eat a
it's like
chicken.
farmers, they're eating.
But they didn't slice the bones like
Well,
that.
they're
did they?
making
Well,
ribs
you're
and
just
stuff, I don't
cutting
know.
it, kind of.
They
Yeah, could
accidentally
nick it.
cut it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. That's a good question, though. I don't know.
Yeah, why would they?
Or it
Bury
could
them
have
in the
been.
yard.
It could have been a cult
Yeah.
back then that wanted
Yeah.
Right.
to do
Chicken
something
cult.
to chicken.
Well, and the other
Chicken
thing is,
sacrifice. Yes.
I mean, I like to look at it through the human condition and then through even today's thing where, you know, how the media, you know, a guy becomes a superstar in the newspapers because, I mean, it's popular to talk about it, both in England and homes, you know, all the newspaper stuff, and that kind of creates a whole myth around the person.
Yeah.
Where
Right.
they hype it up, right? And just like today, people,
Right.
certain people have gotten hyped up through media, even though they're not very admirable people, that they get hyped up because
Yeah.
it's a lot
Right.
of good
Yeah.
attention.
Right.
Well,
there's
that
plenty of
couple bought the scarf of the one woman that was married.
that was the
That was
weirdest thing.
odd.
Yeah.
Like, who would keep that as a memoir?
They
Like,
had it
on
all
your
framed and-
Right.
frame.
Didn't they, and then they did, you know, I
That
don't-
was the second victim or the first victim. Who was it?
I don't remember.
It was one of Jack
One or
the
two.
Ripper's victims.
Yeah, I think it was the second.
That there was a shawl that she had on, and it found its way. It was cut up and given to different people. One of the police officers
Oh, yeah,
that was
that's
there took it, and then it wound up getting cut
Like,
up.
sold. Yeah.
Yeah, and this couple in England did purchase it, and they had it framed, 2 swatches framed. So they did do DNA to see if any of that DNA would match.
Right, they were gonna
H.H.
use-
Holmes.
well,
Right.
it
They're gonna
actually
use
did
Jack.
match a person that was in England. His
It
name
did?
was Aaron Kaminsky.
Mm-hmm.
He was a barber.
That's
It was Catherine Ebbs. Catherine Eddis, that was her.
Edis, I think. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the victim.
Yeah. Well, the DNA matched him,
Okay.
and he was actually one of the quote unquote.
Apparently there was a main person.
One of the suspects.
Yeah, he was a
Okay.
barber in White Castle
Yeah,
at
okay.
that
I remember
time,
about that.
Okay.
I remember hearing about that.
and that DNA matched his thing.
But there was other DNA on that too. So
Right.
there was the
There was
majority of one person, and,
And
then
who
there were-
was the majority?
Well, it was that
his-
guy, him and her,
He was the majority.
right? But she was, prostitute, so I don't.
There are
mean-
lots
I don't
of
mean
male
nothing.
people that
And
probably
then
touched
people
it.
could have been handling that
That's
through
what
the
they said.
years.
Yeah,
Since
that's
over
what I
time,
thought.
there's so we
Yeah.
can't touch it.
Yeah.
But it was amazing that they were able to extract DNA, and then they found a relative of this guy, and then you were able to say, yeah, it matched. That was
Yeah.
him.
That is very amazing.
That is.
Everything that
After
they
all
could
that
do
time.
after over
Yeah.
100 years.
Yeah.
They could take this swatch of cloth that probably was in, attic, was in a basement, was in wherever the heck this police officer might have left it, and then wound up.
I mean, it
Making
would
its
be
way
really
to-
interesting because,
I'm sorry.
I talked to my daughter. My daughter she worked for the Discovery Channel. Now she's working for Fox Entertainment in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
And she has actually been part of producing these type shows. And she's a bit of, I mean,
Is she a skeptic too, Keith?
well, yeah, because she knows what's going on behind the scenes. And now, I enjoyed the program, I enjoyed it, but I wonder how much you could buy into this, because it's almost like, and that's what my daughter was telling me, that these so-called experts, a lot of times they're just
not?
guys, they're just talented people with like bachelor degrees, and they're good on camera, but they're not actually like experts.
Yeah, because
It
we were
wouldn't,
saying the
like,
real
in the real
experts
sense.
probably wouldn't be as good on TV as these people.
Right.
So the
Probably
real
boring.
experts
Yeah.
were probably boring.
Well, I
So
think,
they
I
couldn't
think,
use them.
I think the people,
You know, I just
the people
I
who were
don't
doing the
know.
DNA analysis, I think they were real. I mean,
I think-
they were not.
Well, it was a lab. It had to be a lab.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It-
the one who, after they brought what they thought were the bones of poor Benjamin
Pickel.
Pickel to the lab, I mean, she was honest with them and said, no, this is animal bones. It's not a person.
Oh, so they